Now to the story making news around the world, the escalating trouble in the Arab world, the largest anti-government protests that Egypt has seen in decades. Just a short time ago, the embattled Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak went on nationwide television to tell his people they must obey the law. He also says he's asked his cabinet to resign and promises there will be a new government appointed. It was Mubarak's first appearance since the protests erupted demanding his ouster, and it has been a wild and violent night on the streets of Cairo, demonstrators ignoring a curfew, burning down the ruling party headquarters. A News reporter Eric Thompson has been following the latest.
Chaos in the streets of Cairo. The fourth day of Egypt's bloody protests were the biggest the country has seen since they started on Tuesday. Out with Mubarak, they chanted, "We want change." The response was swift, often brutal. Water cannons, volley after volley of tear gas, and sometimes blasts of buckshot. It was the same in other major cities. It all added up to the most intense government action this nation has ever witnessed. Police were in position at dawn. Authorities well aware something big was being planned on what is normally a holiday, a quiet day of prayer. The army moved in to enforce a curfew that tens of thousands defied, setting fire to police vans and the leading party headquarters. Hungry, unemployed, and tired of rampant corruption, the protesters are demanding that President Hosni Mubarak step down after 30 years in power.
I have asked the government to present its resignation today, and starting tomorrow, I will give the new government new and precise directions to firmly deal with our current priorities.
They accused the United States of not doing enough to support freedom in this country.
What's needed right now are concrete steps that advance the rights of the Egyptian people, a meaningful dialogue between the government and its citizens, and a path of political change that leads to a future of greater freedom and greater opportunity and justice for the Egyptian people.
As dusk fell in Egypt, protesters stopped to pray, a brief lull before the curfew, but it wasn't long before the violence erupted again. Further sign that the protesters believe change is within reach and the clashes will continue. Eric Thompson, A News.
In a statement issued in Ottawa tonight, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Lawrence Cannon says Canada calls on all parties to remain calm and to continue to respect freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. He says we call on the government of Egypt to ensure that freedom of expression is respected by, among other measures, unblocking internet sites, as has been the case. Well, it is just after 4 in the morning in Egypt now, tomorrow morning, and as the sun comes up over the pyramids, the protesters prepare for what will likely be another bloody day of demonstrations. And watching and worrying from half a world away are Egyptian Canadians on Vancouver Island, hoping and praying that their loved ones are safe. A News reporter Aaron Glazier has that part of the story.
Now tanks in the street, tanks to rule. Make him stay on his throne. It's been there for 30 years. It's enough.
Khaled Elmawardy was born in Egypt but immigrated to Canada in 1994 to escape the conditions of poverty and dictatorship his people are protesting against.
People live here like humans, which we miss in our country. Unfortunately, I'm very sad for the people living there now, and my heart with them. And I hope they would be heard for the first time.
A civil engineer by trade, he says he couldn't make a living in Egypt because of the government. Today, his peaceful shop in Victoria is a far cry from the guns and violence.
They're shooting at them as if they are enemies or thieves, which is just terrible, terrible.
Many say this latest uprising is inspired by the recent anti-government protests in Tunisia, but some say there are a number of factors as to why the Egyptian people have reached their breaking point.
There's also extreme rising food prices in the Middle East, especially in Egypt and the Maghreb countries. And I think also a large proportion of the the people who live in Egypt, the large proportion of young people are under 30 years old. So you have these demographic pressures that are requiring change.
And that fear has the Egyptian government going to great lengths to choke the uprising. They've cut cell service, TV channels, and the internet. But Khaled is still able to keep in contact with his 85-year-old mother and sister who live in Cairo by landline.
I'm very worried. I've just talked to my family this morning, and they are okay. There's been a curfew that's been imposed in, actually, I would say 95% of Egypt.
Still, thousands are defying that curfew, and Khaled says he is saddened that people have to die to bring change to the government.
All you see in Egypt is poverty, corruption, and sadness. I hope it will change. I pray to God that it will change the situation.
Aaron Glazier joins us now with more. Aaron, what does Khaled think about the Mubarak statement? Will the creation of a new government end the protests?
Hudson, as we know, the protests have not stopped, even though Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has asked his cabinet to dismantle. And Khaled says he doesn't expect that announcement to bring any, or have any bearing rather, on the protest. People will not stop until Mubarak, as the head of this dictatorship, has stepped down.
All right. Aaron Glazier, thank you.
You're welcome.